Alaska Native Studies, Anthropology, F. 242. Report by Trina Rowley, 2012. Place where owls are hunted, Ukpeagvik. The largest village along the Chukchi Sea and Beaufort Sea is known by Alaskan natives as Ukpeagvik, but is better known throughout Alaska as Point Barrow. It is an amazing place to have lived and learned important values as a teenager, which has left a desire for me to move back to Alaska after being gone for the last 25 years. I moved to Barrow as a 13-year-old girl from Idaho and had only imagined the Eskimo people as living in igloos, eating raw fish, and giving Eskimo kisses by rubbing of noses. My life changed one day, however, when I came home from a school event and my parents called my sister and me to their bedroom where they had been talking. Shanna and I entered clueless as to how our world was about to be impacted by a glossed aerial photograph and a short paragraph in a large book sprawled out on my parents' bed. They were smiling and seemed excited, almost like it was Christmas morning and they had a wonderful thing to share with us. My father gestured for us to come closer and see this beautiful photo that he wanted to share with us. I remember walking to and then climbing upon their huge queen-sized bed and looking at that photograph. My world came crashing all around me upon him saying, "This is where we are going to move. I am leaving tomorrow, and you girls will follow in August." I ran to my room screaming and crying because I didn't want to live anywhere but the little town in Idaho where I had thus far grown up. My father packed one small suitcase and left the following day, leaving Mom in charge of shutting down our small mechanic business and liquidating our household assets. 3 months later, my sister, mother, and I were dropped off at Boise International Airport with 21 boxes of luggage, 7 of which were toys, and a small animal cage housing our 2 precious dogs. The reservation lady wasn't going to accept all of our boxes. Mom then proceeded to tape boxes together until she had 11, and they accepted them. And then we rushed through security, boarded, and headed towards Alaska with a layover and a night in Seattle, Washington. It was 2 long days before we flew above Barrow, and finally that glossed photograph was a real-life image, and our lives did change forever. We stepped off of the plane onto a runway, the only paved road in town, and walked towards a 2-story building, which was the airport. Inside, our boxes were being thrown through a garage-sized door onto a small platform where you grabbed your luggage. After Dad gave hugs and kisses, he grabbed the boxes and hauled them out to our truck, which was covered in dust from the unpaved road system of Barrow. We climbed in, and Dad gave us a tour of our new home community. The houses weren't painted, with the exception of a small handful, and the homes were built on pilings. Animal hides were being stretched and hung on the sides of the homes. Snowmobiles, 3-wheelers, and trucks fronted almost every house, and occasionally you would see an overturned whaling boat called an umiak, or a dog team sled called an unit. As we drove through the town, Dad pointed out the local grocery store, Ukpeagvik, Inupiat for the big store. Barrow had 1 large store and 2 smaller convenience stores in the 80s that sold groceries such as fresh produce, which you had to check to make sure it wasn't moldy by looking into the bread or potato bag, or turn fruit round and round to make sure it was still desirable to eat. Fresh beef, which you checked to make sure hadn't turned green. Fresh dairy, which you checked to make sure hadn't curdled. And packaged and canned goods that you double-checked the expiration date on. Currently, Barrow still has 3 stores, but the main grocery store is now called AC Store, which is owned by a Canadian corporation. Barges still bring in supplies during open water for those with larger supply orders for product that you can't purchase in town, such as vehicles or household furniture. Alaska Air Cargo will also deliver such goods. Dad also pointed out local restaurants, which were few when we arrived: Pepe's Mexican Food, Sam and Lee's, Ken's, and Brower's Cafe, which are almost all in business today. In addition are now the Northern Lights, Arctic Pizza, Osaka's sushi restaurant, but Ken's has shut down. Traditional foods that aren't sold at the local grocery store include meat and blubber from whales, seal, walrus, caribou, whitefish, char, cod, snowy owls, ptarmigan, geese, duck, and berries picked off of the land. I have learned in talking with many of my Inupiat friends that their diet is a blended one of traditional foods offered by the land and westernized foods purchased at the local stores, and many times they have both types of food on the dinner table. After a while, we went to the place Dad had been living for the last 3 months, but we would be moving out of the following day. The apartment was a studio with a loft and a shared bathroom facility down the hall. I needed desperately to use the bathroom, and then I was struck with more bad news. These dwellings housed 4 homes, built on pilings, and were damp, which meant that they had running water to the kitchen only, and the bathroom toilets were honey buckets. Honey bucket is a bucket that is used as a toilet in communities that lack a waterborne sewage system. Well, the honey buckets were full, so Dad tied them up and hauled them to the street, where the sanitation truck would eventually drive by and pick up the raw sewage. That is, if the bag didn't break prior to it being hauled away. The water used in the kitchen was delivered by Joe, the water man, in his white t-shirt, denim jeans, and orange gloves that he wore in all degrees of weather, from negative 70 degrees Fahrenheit to a positive 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Water was delivered, you paid by the gallon, then stored it in holding tanks in your home. In 1984, the building of the Utilidor, a wooden trapezoid structure built in the ground's permafrost, which allowed water, sewage, phone lines, cable for television communication networks, fiber optics, and electric service lines, would run to local homes and businesses along the 3.2-mile structure. I remember some of my native friends having garbage cans filled with liners with chunks of aqua blue iceberg cut by chainsaw and brought to their homes for drinking water to avoid the fees of delivery, and it also tasted better. The following day we moved into our new one-bedroom apartment, which was located across the street from the local school. The school system was preschool through the high school, but the grade levels were divided by corridors, which also branched out into teacher housing. Mom walked Shanna and I across the street to enroll us in school, and while she was there, convinced them that they needed an additional mathematics teacher. School was scheduled to start in 2 weeks, and until then, Mom, Shanna, and I went shopping, went for walks, set up house, and we watched TV. If we had been another 25 miles farther north, Barrow wouldn't have had the capability of having television or radio communications due to the range and angle of the satellite feed in the 1980s. During my first 2 years of being in Barrow, the North Slope Borough School District had designed and built a brand new high school that grades 7th through 12th would utilize. Barrow High School was far from the original schooling system offered in the 1890s, which was a rescue station used for housing sailors that had been shipwrecked for the winter, and only one teacher was available for teaching, and he couldn't speak Inupiaq. An actual schoolhouse was built 4 years later when education was taken over by the government, instead of being provided by the church. However, many students were only taught through grade school, then went to boarding schools away from home for high school education in the early part of the 20th century, but that changed in the 1970s when high school was finally offered in Barrow. At the new 1983 high school, new opportunities were available for students from the use of Apple computers in the computer lab, weight room, indoor swimming pool, full-size gymnasium, automotive and woodshop wing, band, drama, home economics, and all the areas of general studies. The students were encouraged to participate in after-school activities, and with being a member of sports, band, drama, government courses, French, and Skills USA, which is a vocational training for the workforce, the students traveled around the world for life experiences that would have always left cherished memories. Since I have moved out of Barrow, the city built Hobson Middle School and Ilisavik Community College, and Barrow High School now has a football team. Being curious if the staff ratio for ethnic teachers had increased since I had lived there, I called Barrow High School and found out that there is only one Inupiat teacher at the high school level, and she teaches Inupiaq. As a student of Barrow High School in the 80s, we only had 2 Inupiat teachers, so the ratio has dwindled by 50% in 25 years. As I grew up in Barrow, I learned how blessed I was to be living in a larger Eskimo village, the largest on the North Slope. Jobs were readily available to find as a student and as an adult, but housing was a more challenging obstacle. I worked as a student at the high school swimming pool as a lifeguard, but the homes I lived in were provided by my parents' employers, the first being Eskimo Incorporated, then North Slope Borough Utilidor Project, also known as South Pad, and lastly by the North Slope Borough School District. Barrow job opportunities were in the fields of healthcare, education, government, and retail. I researched through Simply Hired website to see if the same types of jobs were available, and these were the percentages of jobs I found currently. Among the most common occupations in Barrow are management, professional, and related occupations, which equaled 34%. Sales and office occupations, 21%. Service occupations, which was 13%. Approximately 34% of workers in Barrow work for companies, 52% work for the government, and 2% are self-employed. The average salary for households according to government data provided by Simply Hired is between $49,170 and $67,097 annually. In the last 2 years, however, jobs have decreased by roughly 4% according to Barrow Trends data, and current data shows that Barrow has a 12.7% unemployment rate. Although there are still many jobs available, housing becomes challenging for many in this village. Housing is part of your contract with many of the health, teaching, and government jobs, and privately owned homes are a rarity. Very few non-natives actually own housing in Barrow, but if you are essential to the well-being of Indian families in the community, then you may qualify for a Tagmulu Nanamulu Housing Authority assistance with the purchase of a home. Housing in the village is offered through fair market rental programs, low rental housing programs, lease purchase home ownership programs, and North Slope elder housing programs. These programs all offer modernized and rehabilitated, low rent with mutual help from upgraded heating and electric systems, and teach sustainability for ownership at fair market values. One Inupiat friend told me when asking him what regulations are on whites buying land to build a home on, he told me this: "This is America. Anyone can buy a home. Money talks." This statement has not always been true, though it is becoming truer now that lands aren't locked from the Native Land Claims Act. In my writings, I had planned on covering information regarding education, food sources, transportation, and housing, while reminiscing about my life in Barrow and communicating with old friends that I still converse with, mainly by means of Facebook, and also while talking with immediate family that shared experiences of Barrow life. Barrow was an amazing village to experience growth and understanding of new culture for myself, and my friends that remain living that wonderful village life continue to mix tradition with a westernized world that has an ever-changing social economy. Juggling old traditions with new have created some hurdles for the Inupiat culture. Continued teaching of heritage, a word that has only been used in the past 50 years or so in Inupiat life, will continue as long as there are people wanting to live in Ukpeagvik, a place where owls are hunted, also known as Barrow. The factors education, transportation, and even housing have played with the changing tides have not only changed the life of the Alaskan Eskimo in Barrow, but have also changed my life and views of culture forever. Village life is not an easy life. It is one that deserves recognition of survival in a new generational era. As I boarded the Alaskan Airlines 737 flight out of Barrow, I buckled up and leaned back, excited for a new challenge, until the plane lifted off of the ground. I looked out that window, seeing once again that aerial image of a small Eskimo village that I have now called home. I have only been back to Barrow once in the last 25 years, but yearn to visit that wonderful community and visit the many Inupiat friends I now know from yesteryear.